Intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene. And if you don't like it, lump it.
The problem with America is not that we go around marauding around the world imposing ourselves. The problem with America in the last 10, 15 years since the end of the Cold War, really in the last 60 years, is that we've been too slow to get involved.
I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
You know, that land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
Welcome to the Darkened Hour. I'm your host, Adam Fitzgerald. The pretext to the September 11th attacks, 1993 World Trade Center bombing. The Balochi clan, or more notably, the uncle and nephew partnership of Ramzi Yousef and Khalid Sheikh Muhammad, is rather underreported in the pretext to the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. In today's conversation, we're going to be talking about the massive influence between the duo and the 1993 World Trade Center attacks coming from Balochistan, Pakistan, and what it meant to the world in regards to the formation and early time frame regarding Ramzi Yousef and Khalid Sheikh Muhammad. And to talk a little bit further, I'm going to be bringing up the conversation into an early period in which generally most people aren't aware or generally are ignorant about. And that is because largely the legacy media has no care in educating the public about these two individuals who have a resounding importance on our daily lives regarding these two magnificent attacks upon our country. We'll start in Balochistan, Pakistan, the largest province which forms southwest of the country, with Quetta as its main capital. Islam is the predominant religion here, at a 99% capita rate, even though it has a minority of Pashtuns and Pakistani Christians. Balochistan is indeed a thoroughfare between Afghanistan and India. According to very sparse information, it is here where Abdul Basit Abdul Karim would begin his childhood. Although he was born in Kuwait, his family would move back to Pakistan in the mid-1980s. Abdul Karim's father, Muhammad Abdul Karim, would be considered an Ajam, meaning in Arabic meaning which would not be of his mother tongue. He was an illiterate. Very little information exists regarding Abdul Basit's childhood and his family. From what is known, while living in Pakistan, he was sent to the United Kingdom to further his education and escape the dirt roads of Balochistan, which was, in the 1980s, a neighborhood which catered to the Mujahideen fighters arriving to train and become a Mujahid in the Afghan war against the Soviet invaders. It is also rumored here that Yousef would join the Muslim Brotherhood as well. Other notable family members would include Khalid Sheikh Muhammad, whose family was not as obscure as Basit's, however. Basit's maternal uncle, KSM, would claim Balochistan as birthplace. His father, Sheikh Muhammad Ali Dostan Balochi, was a Deobandi imam who moved the family to Kuwait from Balochistan in the 1960s. His mother, Halima Muhammad. It is not known at what date KSM was born. Some say March 1st, 1964. Others, April 14th, 1965. In time, Abdul Basit Karim would use an alias, one that would be known to everyone in the world in soon time: Ramzi Yousef. There are rumors during this period of Yousef's life that the Central Intelligence Agency had recruited Yousef as part of its Operation Cyclone operation, where the CIA had helped Afghan and Islamic Mujahideen fighters in training camps located in Peshawar in Islamabad, Pakistan, against the Soviets. According to a 1995 Newsday article, now defunct, from the quoted History Commons, quote, FBI officials are also considering a probe of whether the CIA had any relationship with Yousef, who fought with the CIA-financed Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 1980s, end quote. Yousef went to study electrical engineering while at the Swansea Institute in Wales. While on a semester break in 1988, Yousef arrived in Peshawar and began training in computer-aided electrical engineering. In 1989, he once again returned to Peshawar and began training at the Sada training camp for Afghan Mujahideen fighters. There, he learned how to manufacture explosives from Abu Jafar al-Qandari, who is an explosive expert from the Jihad Wild training camp, which was located in Khost, Afghanistan. Jafar also trained another fellow Mujahid who just arrived in 1989, Ahmad Ajaj. Yousef graduated from Swansea in 1989, just before he began training at the Sada camp, operated under Afghan warlord and de facto head of the Northern Alliance, Abdul Basit Karim. Meanwhile, Khalid Sheikh Muhammad had begun his fascination with the Afghan-Soviet War while listening to a speech given by Abdul Basit Karim in 1982. Saif had declared a global jihad against the Soviet invaders in which, much like his nephew, Yousef, KSM joined the Muslim Brotherhood. He was 16 at the time in 1983, but in 1984, after graduating high school, Khalid Sheikh Muhammad would travel to North Carolina to begin his studies for electrical engineering at North Carolina A&T. While at the university, KSM would be subjugated to humiliating prejudices by fellow students. During morning and evening prayers, shoes and sandals belonging to Muslims would be thrown in a nearby lake. Almost a weekly barrage of racial epithets and discrimination would enrage KSM from within. Here, he despised Americans because of their daily tortures. In 1986, KSM received his bachelor's and would relocate back to Peshawar, but this time with a newfound zeal for revenge against his Western adversaries, where before his arrival to the United States none existed. While in Peshawar, he would reunite with his older brother Sahid al-Sheikh, who was fully involved in the Afghan-Soviet War. Sahid would introduce KSM to Abdul Azam, who would be known to almost everyone in the Middle East as the godfather of modern-day jihad. KSM would begin working out of the Sada training camp operated by Azam. Immediately and afterwards, KSM would begin working for Abdul Basit's magazine, Al-Bunyan al-Mahsus. According to accounts from counterterrorism expert Rohan Guantanara, KSM would travel to the Philippines in 1991 at the behest of Saudi national and Soviet Afghan hero Osama bin Laden to train members of the militant groups Abu Sayyaf and the Moral Islamic Liberation Front in bomb-making and assassination. He works with bin Laden's brother-in-law, Mohammed Jamal Khalifa, to establish an operational base there and also based in Malaysia. Khalifa is bin Laden's brother-in-law and has numerous businesses in the Philippines. It is here that KSM would be considered a valuable asset to bin Laden personally. By 1993, KSM would marry and relocate to Qatar. Ramzi Yousef would then complete his training from Abu Jafar al-Qandari at the Sada training camp. Even though, according to Jafar, Yousef was not that impressionable in bomb making. Ajaj was, however, better suited at it. Ajaj, along with Yousef, would then travel to the mountainous Paktia province near Torabar of Afghanistan to train in explosives at the Chaldean camp. The camp was run by a Saudi, Khalid Sheikh Muhammad al-Habashi. The camp was at odds with the Al-Qaeda camp, however, which differed at the religious ideology, and was at odds with Osama bin Laden due to al-Habashi's insistence that bin Laden not kill civilians during his jihad against the West. The Taliban would notice the division between the two and force the camp to shut down by the summer of 2000. Meanwhile, a local imam at the Al-Farouk Mosque located in Brooklyn, New York, Omar Abdul Rahman, would begin planning to bomb Jewish neighborhoods and other high-valued American targets. Rahman was also known to others as the Blind Sheikh. He was head of the Gamma Islamiyah, which was a terrorist training organization in Egypt. The de facto head of Gamma Islamiyah in Egypt, he had tapped a personal bodyguard of his to construct bombs to the man's previous experience in the Special Armed Forces while in Egypt. His name was Imad Salem. Salem, meanwhile, was working as an undercover informant for the New York Joint Terrorism Task Force and the FBI supervised by Nancy Floyd. But the FBI had pulled Salem out of the operation. It left a void for Rahman, who called Abdul Azam in Peshawar. The recommendation for the replacement? Ramzi Yousef. Both Yousef and a judge would leave the country of Pakistan, and on August 31st, 1993, using the services of local Pakistan travel agent, board Pakistan International Airlines 703 to Karachi, and then to JFK Airport in New York City. Ajaj and Yousef together had 5 passports and numerous documents supporting their aliases. A Saudi passport showing signs of alteration, an Iraqi passport bought from a Pakistani official, a photo substituted Swedish passport, a photo substituted British passport, a Jordanian passport, identification cards, bank records, education records, and medical records. While awaiting a JFK secondary immigration inspection, a judge would produce a crudely made passport in which he would state that he was Swedish. The passport was legitimate, belonging to a Swedish citizen who had attended a training camp in Pakistan and surrendered his identity cards to those who ran the camp. But the judge had used simple paste to plaster his own photograph over the legitimate owner. The inspectors noticed it right away and held the judge along with his belongings that when inspectors found inside was quite revealing. While in an immigration national inspection waiting room, inspectors Mark Cozine and Robert Malfonte would look through a judge suitcase. In it, they found bomb-making manuals, videos and other materials on possible weapons and explosives assembly, letters referencing his attendance at training camps, anti-American and anti-Israeli materials, instructions on document forgery, and 2 rubber-stamped devices to alter the seal on passports issued from Saudi Arabia. Included on one of the manuals is a very interesting document which was written in 1982. It had the title Al-Qaeda, which would mean that 7 years prior to the group's formation, it was used in a context many years prior to which it was even acknowledged as a group. Agents of INS immediately called the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force and the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Unit. Both agencies declined to get involved in the incident. A judge would be held in the detention center pending his situation by New York courts on what to do with him. Yousef, however, saw what was happening with the judge. Yousef produces an Iraqi passport bearing a visa issued by the Pakistan Embassy in Pakistan before an INS officer. Yousef would request for political asylum. He would be held and questioned in INS for 3 days. The INS officer who inspected Yousef upon arrival requested he not enter the country, but due to overcrowding on the detention cells, he was given a future date for court regarding his situation. To Yousef's surprise, he was freed, and although he had little to no money, he managed to pick up a taxi ride into New Jersey by a Pakistani taxi driver who showed pity to Yousef's plight. The ride was free of charge. Yousef would arrive at the Al Farouk Mosque in Brooklyn. A short while later, he would sleep inside his makeshift room on a cot. A judge, meanwhile, would be closely investigated while being held. According to Robert Friedman of the Village Voice, whose article, quote, Mossad linked to WTC bombing suspect, end quote, a judge had been recruited by the Israeli Mossad. Quote, the FBI had identified a judge as a senior Intifada activist in the occupied territories, having close ties to both Al-Fatah, a consistent group of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and Hamas, a Palestinian Islamic fundamentalist organization. But according to Kol Al-Har, a highly regarded Hebrew language weekly in Jerusalem, Ajad was never involved in Intifada activities, or with the PLO, or with Hamas. Citing court papers and other sources, Kol Harad says that far from being a political activist, Ajad was actually a small-time crook who was arrested in 1988 for counterfeiting U.S. dollars. Ajad and two other members of his counterfeiting ring ran a printing press in an Arab cemetery outside East Jerusalem, housing their equipment in the same building where religious Muslims washed corpses before burial. When Israeli police raided the cemetery, they arrested Ajad, who was holding some $100,000 of bogus U.S. currency. Another member was carrying an antiquated pistol. Ajad was convicted for counterfeiting and sentenced to 2.5 years. It was during his prison stay that Mossad, Israeli CIA, apparently recruiting him, saying Israeli intelligence sources. By the time he was released, after having served 1 year, he had seemingly undergone a radical transformation. The common crook had become a devout Muslim and hardline nationalist. Soon after, he was arrested for smuggling weapons into the West Bank, allegedly for Al-Fatah. End quote. From September 1992 onward, Yousef would continue to remain in contact with the judge, even though he was incarcerated. A judge never contacted Yousef directly. Calls were patched to Big Five Hamburgers in Dallas from associates that Judge knew, as the judge had once residency in Houston, working as a pizza delivery driver while living inside the United States after he was released from prison by Israeli authorities. The judge would remain busy, assisting Yousef in constructing a bomb which would now be used in an attack inside the North Tower at the World Trade Center. The operation would be known only to Ramzi Yousef and Abdul Rahman. Through the luck that followed, Yousef from inside an INS detention cell, it would follow him to Brooklyn by the way of a cab ride, to the Al Farouk Mosque, where he would replace Imad Salem as the constructor of a bomb which would later be placed inside a rider truck on that cold morning of February 26, 1993. Ajad would be released from prison on March 1, 1993, just 3 days after the World Trade Center bombing. Immediately after declaring himself as the perpetrator to a phone call in Lower Manhattan, Yousef would flee to Pakistan. Meanwhile, Khalid Sheikh Muhammad was living inside Qatar. The citizens of New York City and elsewhere in the United States wouldn't be as lucky from hereafter, as the terrorist activities of Ramzi Yousef, Omar Abdul Rahman, and Khalid Sheikh Muhammad, with the intelligence services as a watchful eye from near and afar, would visit it with complete and utter destruction, which would then give the world a makeshift conversion into an Orwellian nightmare for all of time. This completes an episode of The Darkened Hour. My name is Adam Fitzgerald, and we will continue with the next episode next time.